Hello, this is Dr. Basil Considine. I'm here from the ACU Online Writing Center, and today we're going to talk about how to write a concise literature review. Now, this particular webinar is going in a direction that not everyone chooses. I have seen literature reviews for a course paper that are 1 or 2 pages. I have seen literature reviews for a doctoral dissertation that were in excess of 100 pages. Now, the truth is that how long your literature review is going to be is going to depend a lot on the particular topic or issue that you are exploring, and also on the boundaries that you make. If you wanted to write a dissertation about the history of education in the world, that would be a very broad topic, and you could have an incredibly long literature review. But there's also a curatorial process that I strongly suggest that you apply, where you pick the most relevant sources for what you'll be describing. Now, this particular assignment that we're looking at today is coming from the EdD program, and there is a particular length that is specified here, in part because the faculty want you to learn these skills of writing about the most relevant pieces of information, and to not include things just for the sake of comprehensivity, but to make sure that what you are writing is directly relevant and helpful to the reader to know about. We'll talk about more of those things as we go through. Coming up on our schedule here, we have just a few things to cover. If you are new to the Writing Center, welcome. We have not only many webinars like this, all of which are recorded and posted to the Writing Center website, but we're also available to work with students through email consultations, through asynchronous appointments where you send your draft with any special requests for comments and we send you feedback via email, or phone or Zoom appointments. Phone or Zoom appointments, we're happy to offer them. It is generally easier to schedule them if it's earlier in the semester, by which I mean not week 6 or 7. Weeks 6 or 7 tend to be the busiest because people are working on their final papers, which are often much longer and involve culminating material that you've been working on throughout the term. And we tend to get fully booked there. If you want to request a phone or Zoom appointment, contact us sooner rather than later. Give us a list of potential times. Make sure to include your local time zone because not all of our students are located in Central Time. And we'll see if we can match you up with our staff. We also have paper templates, another thing that you'll see today, as well as posts on specific topics on the Online Writing Center website. A couple webinars coming up soon that you might be interested in. Well, we have, in addition to our perennial favorite about synthesis beyond summary, adding analysis and synthesis to your writing, also coming up, we have a dedicated webinar about theoretical and conceptual frameworks. That is going to be a virtual release like this one, meaning you will be able to access it online. And it's not a webinar you dial into and attend in the in a live format. So you'll be able to watch that at any time. That's getting released on Thursday at noon, and Tuesday at noon. We have coming up also another webinar in our EdD in Progress series about writing original case study analysis, as well as another one about writing about personal health records with a tie-in for literature reviews. So if you are not familiar with our catalog of webinars, do be aware that we have many that look at specific assignments that may have their own particular constraints in terms of length or design or elements that the faculty ask you to discuss. And although most of the principles that we will present in this one are broadly applicable to other programs, if that you are watching this and you are enrolled in, say, the CONAR program or the DMP program, do check on our website because we have some specific resources for you. Speaking of the website, if you go to the link that you see on the page right now, that will bring you to our webinar guide. And if you scroll down past the calendar schedule, you will find this sorted program guide to our different courses. So for the EdD program, you'd want to just click on the EdD tab here, and that will bring up a list sorted by the course number. So for example, Leadership 701, you'll see all the webinars that are for specific things in that class first, and then the ones for Leadership 711, for 714, so on and so forth. All right, a few other things. You will see me using an APA course paper template. We have our videos posted to our YouTube channel, and again, we do have a blog where we explore various topics. All right, we've got a full schedule, so we're going to dive into our learning objectives from here, starting with exploring the core principles of literature review writing, after which we'll talk about the journal article discovery process, which is not just finding things, but being able to describe how you find them, looking at the specific constraints and rubric for this assignment, and then we'll talk about how to go from the assignment instructions to drafting and outlining. All right, let's talk about the principles of literature review writing. Starting with, what are some of the reasons that you're writing one? Well, one is to demonstrate that you have an understanding of key literature that's related to the problem or issue that you are exploring. Now, this is a problem or issue within a larger topic. If you have attended some of my webinars on problem statements, you know that I recommend differentiating between the general problem and the specific problem. A general problem might be something like, certain racial and ethnic groups in the United States have a higher attrition rate in high school, so more of those students are, statistically speaking, likely to drop out. That's a very broad problem, and we have 50 U.S. states and multiple territories and things like that, so that's a lot of different educational systems to do. It would be much more manageable to do in the time allotted to write a dissertation that looks at that general problem, but looks at it through the lens of more specific things, such as, within the lens of the problem at this local level in the specific school district, possibly even at that school. And that's going to depend a little bit on the details because, for example, if we were looking at a education in the state of Delaware, well, Delaware is a very small U.S. state, geographically speaking, so that would actually be doable for the scope of a dissertation. If you're trying to do the state of California, well, that's a very big state, and there are a lot of cultural and other complicating factors that may make it awfully different if you have, say, a school district that's located in the middle of Sequoia National Forest versus, a coastal school district in, say, Los Angeles. So being able to demonstrate that you understand the key literature related to the problem or issue is a lot easier if you've narrowed down and say, okay, well, we're working on this subset related to this area. And that shows in part your ability to critically evaluate research in the field. It's not that you might learn something, it's not that you might not learn something about, say, a school district in Florida when you're working on in California, but there's so many differences there that you want to make sure that you are pulling only the most relevant thing, that you've done this critical evaluation, and that's a key to writing a more concise lit review. You also want to make sure that your literature review is providing evidence and context to support a few things. The conduct of new research, namely the study that you will eventually write as an EdD student, that it will give enough information to guide interpreting any findings, and that it will give you an understanding of future implications. What are the stakes? Now, one of the things that comes up with here is that people will start to write a great deal about the research they plan to do. Don't do that yet. You can take notes on that, but there will be a later course where you actually start working on describing your research design. And at this stage, it's more looking and saying, okay, this is what people have done. Here's the kind of results that they got. Basically, was the research design that they did useful for this sort of thing? Does that provide any guiding information for future research in this area or with the particular focus that you're using? You also want to make sure that your literature review is crediting other researchers for the contributions. don't just summarize, you also need to cite. And this is partly because you don't want to make unsupported assertions. If you say, many studies have found this, but you don't give us any supporting examples, it can read like you're making things up. And remember, writing in APA style, we always need to acknowledge our sources, where this information is coming from. At the same time, a major purpose of the literature review is to note what hasn't been discussed or haven't been explored in detail, a gap in the literature or multiple gaps. Now, you may identify multiple gaps, but in your later study, you don't need to address all of them. And in fact, in your literature review, you shouldn't be writing about how you will address that. That comes in the research design, what will become Chapter 3 in the dissertation. So let's make sure that you're sticking to what you need to do now and not what would happen in completely separate assignments and parts of the dissertation. You also want to avoid unnecessary duplication, and part of that is being able to say, okay, I have checked and made sure that no one else has researched this, because if you did the exact same thing as someone else, and I mean exact same thing, because there's certainly a good purpose for trying it, but with something different, like trying the same study with a different population or in a different area or over a longer period of time. But if you're doing the exact same study as someone else, that's not expected to add much. So usually duplication studies are trying something else. If we got the same group of 100 people and asked them the same questions a week later, they're likely to give the same results. That's less likely to be something helpful. As opposed to, say, if you go and say, okay, well, we found this with 100 college students. What if we looked at 100 people of the same age who aren't college students and see, oh, how do those results compare? All right, so let's distill these things into a couple principles here. First off, you want to identify a narrow topic or issue. And you want to state it clearly and make it clear that you're not just writing saying, oh, there is this thing, but that it's clear that you're stating what the focus is for the literature review. So if we're writing about, say, teacher attrition, that is a bit general. You could write about things all over the world for historical thing, which is very different than if you're saying, oh, I'm looking at high teacher attrition at U.S. public schools. Or even better, let's narrow down, let's like high teacher attrition at U.S. public schools in, say, the Dallas public schools. Now, you also want to make sure that you have and state clear boundaries. And I say state because you may have an idea of the boundaries, but if you don't tell your reader, your professor who's grading will not know that you have them and can't give you credit for that. So make sure you actually write this down. They can include things like the time, the geography, the language of publication, population, and when was this research done, where, so forth. But that all comes out of making sure that you are stating the delimitations or boundaries of your inquiry. Essentially, you are drawing a box around what you're going to write about. What is within the box is relevant, and so you'll write about it. And what is out, you'll clarify is out of scope, and so you don't have to write about it. And that comes both ways, because you want to both state what is within the scope and what is not. Principle 3, make sure that the literature review aligns with the draft research question that you have. Now, your research question will usually evolve quite a bit during the time that you are working on these assignments and the eventual dissertation. That's fine. And some adjustments will also be made in the literature review itself. What you write here is the nucleus of the eventual lit review for the full dissertation. But if you find you're switching to a different region or you're adapting it based on some access you weren't able to get, that's fine. But for now, you will be able to write a more concise and focused lit review if you keep in mind what you are trying to answer, what sort of problem are you trying to solve in some part. So make sure that you provide and discuss information that's related to the underlying problem being addressed, and make it clear that the research question hasn't been answered or fully answered yet, perhaps not answered for the population that you are interested in or the region, to make sure that there's a research gap. Don't answer the research question itself. We don't really do lit reviews for as a complete dissertation. Well, that is a genre, but not one that tends to happen in the EdD program. So your goal in the lit review isn't to answer the research question itself, because you're supposed to have a research question that will require conducting a study to do and collecting new data. So don't try and answer the research question itself, but make sure that it's clear that what your review is making clear. Now, that could be pointing that, oh, well, this is worth asking, or here is a tool for answering this question or understanding this problem. Other principles. Make sure to show your search process. By that, I mean, give us a literature search methods section that lists out where you searched, like what databases or catalogs, the specific keywords or keyword strings that you used, any date or other restrictions that you've used to narrow the results, or perhaps last 5 years, or only looked at peer-reviewed journal articles, things like that, and tell us the number of sources that you reviewed in detail. Now, this is a lot easier if you take notes as you go, and one of the easiest ways to do this, we'll show you later, is to sign in when you do your search, because then you can check and see, oh, yes, I did this search and I got so many results. More on that later. Principle number 5, organize the information. By that we mean start your literature, the body of your literature review, with a discussion of your theoretical or conceptual framework, because this is going to change how you interpret the information and what things are important, what are deemed relevant. Make sure that you state why you're discussing specific studies and how or why their findings are important to what you're trying to do. And make sure that you include analysis and synthesizing. So you want to have summary, so giving key details from the research. You want to have analysis, where you discuss that and you evaluate the evidence that you are summarizing. And synthesis, where you combine it or apply it to new context to create new meaning. And for that, you want to make sure each paragraph starts with the topic sentence that makes a clear claim, so we know, okay, this is what you're trying to convince the reader of. That you present information that's connected with logical bridges, so we understand how this information fits together. That you include some phrasing, logical bridges, that tells us how the different sentences relate to each other. That can be like, if you said in one sentence, oh, this study found that 35% of teachers in this district will resign within the first 3 years of employment. If you are analyzing that by comparing it with other information, you might have, so this contrasts with the neighboring school district that had an attrition rate of only 6% for the same period. And that's telling us, you're saying, oh, yes, that is there, but look, it's actually much larger than this other one. And so how do we know that you are doing the analysis? Because of that lead-in phrase, that logical bridge, like this contrasts with, this aligns with. However, the importance of this finding is limited because, and other things like that. Now, similarly, when you are creating new meaning through synthesis, there are phrases that will suggest that to the reader, like, therefore, this such suggests that, or as a result. And if you attend our webinar on analysis and synthesis that is coming up actually this Tuesday evening, you will get to much more detail on those things and example phrases. And to wrap up our introduction to the lit review, make sure before you start writing that you ask yourself a few questions like, what are the most relevant pieces of information that you are conveying? Does the literature review's structure and its headings, do they have a clear logical order? And is it clear where there are gaps in the literature? Because if you're not sure about these, it's helpful to go look back at them and see, okay, where is the most relevant place to put these? Otherwise, you'll probably have poor flow and write more than you have to. Probably even write in some extra repetition. But if you have a decent idea of the answers to these questions before you start writing when you're at the outlining stage, it'll make it much easier to write. All right, let's talk about the journal article discovery process. Now, this is something that is explored in many different assignments, but there are growing expectations that you will document your process as you go on, because you will, in the end, have to write about this in some detail for the ultimate dissertation. So let's start and go to the ACU Library website and go ahead and type in a search term. So here we are on the library homepage, and let's just say that we were continuing with our early example, and you were researching teacher attrition. So one way to start is to just type in the words and see what you get. See if these search keywords are bringing up some of the things that you are interested in, and thus how much more specific you can or should be. Now, as you do the search, I will say that it is always a good idea to learn more about the search process, and our fantastic librarians are available through this Ask a Librarian link to help you refine your search process. But let's talk through a couple things here. So we started out, we got almost 200,000 results. Great. It's nice to know that there's a lot of stuff out there and that we can be more specific. Let's start out with making sure that we're searching for recent research. Now, there are many different definitions of recent research, and it'll depend partly on the field and the topic. Imagine that you were writing about educational outcomes after Common Core or No Child Left Behind, which made very significant changes to the U.S. public education system. You might not want to really be looking at stuff before those things passage, or at least for the bulk of your lit review, because things change so much. And in a similar sense here, if you're writing about the effects of something very recent, then you will need to be using a lot more current sources. But in general, most professors will use the rule of thumb of recent research is 5 years. Last 5 years. So you could just plop in 2017 and say, okay, well, that's going to be 5 years, right? Well, couple things there. Yes, for this assignment, but knowing that you are going to be writing a dissertation eventually and wanting to reuse as much as possible, assuming you have a lot of results to look with, and we still have 45,000, I would recommend looking at the last 3 years for this assignment to see if you can get things that you know will still remain relevant. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to look at stuff published from 2019 to present. And I'm also going to go ahead and I'm going to select a couple checkboxes on the left-hand side. I'm going to limit this to scholarly peer-reviewed journals only. So things like ebooks, textbooks should be excluded. And I'm also going to go ahead and I'm going to limit this to full text, meaning things that I can access the full text now. I don't need to submit an interlibrary loan request to get it. Because, this is an assignment to write a concise lit review right now. And while for my dissertation, I might go ahead and get more that I can send away and not view for another couple weeks. In this case, the assignment is coming up, and so don't want to waste time about things. And let's see. So far, things are looking pretty good. We've got a lot of results still. So let's see if we can be even more specific. Remember when I said we want to turn on our search history by signing in? So if you look up here and click on sign in, it's just needs to reload the screen, and then it will save your search results so that you can go and look them up later. So in case your computer crashes, as in case you write some notes and then they actually get recycled, you will be able to go back and view those results again. So that is just going to sign you in, and then once you are signed in, you'll be able to continue viewing your results again. And this is something that the library staff also goes into more detail if you ask them or if you watch several of their many webinars, which again I strongly recommend. All right, so let's talk about these results here. You can see that a few options here, including I can save things to a folder, so I might not be reading them right now, but I can always save this one for later. Let's say I look at this one and say, oh, hey, yeah, I'm looking at things that don't involve STEM. Let me go ahead, and now I've got a folder saved on my computer that you can see that there's a result there. So I can just go through and quickly mark some of these. And I happen to be interested in things in the United States, and so I keep going and marking these. And if I see something that looks like it's for a different area, I can just exclude that now. Now you could add United States to your search terms here, and that's certainly fine. Again, if you're looking at a local context, you might want to collapse that down to a particular state, like, say, California or Texas. Let's go with Texas. And one of the great things about starting with so many search results is that although, no, not all of these will be about Texas specifically, we still have a lot of results that have come up. So, all right. I'm going to go ahead and add this one here. All right. So, if you were reporting this, what would you say? Well, you went to one search for Abilene Christian University. That is the specific library catalog tool that you are using. It tells the reader where you went looking. I've limited my search to scholarly peer-reviewed journal articles published since 2019. And so far, I have marked 3 different studies that I'm going to review in detail. All right. Let's head back to our slides here. Now, there's general requirements here. Again, I'm going to suggest last 3 years that the content be specific to the general geographic region that you are interested in, where the issue or problem that you're exploring has been documented. And any of these things that you might apply, make sure that you take notes on it so that you can write up a paragraph about your literature search methods. Now, for the full dissertation, it's probably going to be 1 or 2 substantial paragraphs. For this assignment, it's probably going to be 1 short paragraph, because it's a short, concise lit review. At this point, let's look at the assignment itself. What are we doing today? Well, we're looking at an assignment from Leadership 724, the Leadership in Diverse Contexts course. And this specific assignment from week 5 is to write a literature review related to your diversity and leadership question. And the instructions start with a preamble, where references as material in Leadership 701. If you are taking these slightly out of order, don't worry. We'll get to that in time. But the preamble is giving some guiding words that you will be writing this related to a specific research problem related to diversity and leadership. And that you want to identify a research question that will help you understand the problem and move towards an evidence-based solution, and do a in-depth search for that. So that's the journal article discovery process we're talking about. And that lays a foundation for potential new study. All right. So let's say that we were going to do our search for a diversity and leadership issue. Well, let's go ahead and change some of these things. Leadership. Let's see what we come up with that. And you'll note that this is saving the basic parameters of the previous search, meaning we still have that, okay, only looking for stuff we have full text, that's scholarly peer-reviewed journal articles published since 2019. And so we see we have 639 results. You don't want to read all of them in detail, so you want to browse through. Besides browsing the titles here, you can also go look at the catalog entries, and in most cases, these will have an abstract of the article, so you can see, okay, is this relevant to what I'm doing here? Because it's a lot faster to read this paragraph than it is to read a whole article. Now, this is a 23-page article. The abstract is much more concise. We see, okay, they did look at things with the mind towards 3 cases. They were looking at one of which involved the Texas-Mexico border. All right. And said, okay, great, I want that one. Then you want to go ahead and save that to your folder. So you have it, and you have this option of how to save that, including downloading to your computer. You can also use this handy-dandy Cite button. And the Cite button you can access in more than one place, including right here. If you say, I want this one, you can go ahead, open this up, and scroll down to the APA 7th edition here. Now, this isn't perfect. There's some minor reformatting we need to do. And the minor reformatting is that this text here needs to be in sentence case, because journal article titles are given in sentence case in APA 7th edition when you are writing them in your reference list. But if we just copy and paste this, it's relatively fast to change this to sentence case because everything else is there and correct. Great. So we can copy and paste that into our references list and go ahead and review some other ones. All right, back to the assignment instructions here. All right. Now there's a reminder to review this text because it has some helpful principles for what you should be writing about. But the main parts of the assignment instructions start here. Describe a real leadership situation that includes a diversity need or conflict. All right. And you need to identify a research question related to that. Compose a rational statement. And this is basically, why is it important to answer this question? And it shouldn't just be answer idle curiosity. It should be that we're actually trying to create some sort of solution or create the foundation for finding a solution. Using a library database, this is going to be the ACU Library One search. And then we also want to gather those scholarly articles. And it says we need at least 8 research reports published in peer-reviewed academic journals, got that already, within the last 5 years. And I'm further recommending that last 3 years. At least for the search we did, there were plenty of results from the last 3 years, and that helps make sure that you can draw on those sources in the future. All right, we need to identify relevant concepts with subheadings and present a coherent statement about what is known and needs to be known for these concepts. Synthesize the information, so don't just summarize, as tell us what this means put together. And this should be 4 to 6 pages. That's the body of the paper, not counting the title page, not counting the references list. And APA formatting, of course. And if we look at the rubric here for the paper, note that it specifically says that about 14% of the grade is coming from having that clear organization from appropriate subheadings and coherent statements about what is known and needs to be known for each concept. Those coherent statements are probably going to be topic sentences or the concluding sentences in paragraphs. And just to hammer home, you're supposed to be creating new meaning, not just summarizing. It specifically says, for another 14%, synthesize the cited studies as... All right. At this point, we are going to move on to drafting and outlining. And before you begin, again, make sure that you sign in to save your library search results. When you are working on drafting this assignment, make sure you answer each prompt directly, then respond in detail. Use the language of the prompt so it's clear that you are doing the things you're being asked to do. Use consistent word choices to refer to the same thing. So, like, if you're talking about teacher attrition, don't use departure and non-renewal of contract and things like that synonymously. Use attrition consistently so we know you're talking about the same thing. And again, as with all your other assignments, the rubric instructions give you an idea from how many points are allocated to things, what the approximate length should be. So let's just take a quick look at here, and we see, okay, describes a real organizational situation that includes a diversity and leadership need or conflict, explains the problem clearly and in detail. So based on that getting about 14% and actually that's getting you 15% exactly of the grade, that is going to be something where should be more than a sentence or two. It should be at least one substantial paragraph, possibly two, to really delve into this in detail. And make sure that you are clearly distinguishing between the general and specific problems, because that lets you give a sense of the big picture while also narrowing it so it's something that's practical to do. All right, from here on, you'll see me using the APA course paper template that we have available to download. It's a quick link here. You might want to pause the video and download that now if you don't have it already. So I have here a copy of the APA course paper template. You can fill in the title and your name. I sometimes get questions about the titles, and in APA style, it's important that the title be accurate and concise, but it does not need to be very original sounding or poetic. So in this case, literature review is perfectly fine for our purposes here. All right, so we are going to go back to the assignment instructions here. And ignoring the preamble, looking at you exactly what to do, we're just going to go ahead and copy these instructions right into the template. Now, the organizing principle that I'd like you to take from copy and pasting the instructions into your document is that it is easier to make sure that you've done exactly what is asked when you can quickly look and see, have you used the exact wording? Have you given the information required in the order that is desired? Now, a helpful thing to do there is to go ahead and cross off things that as you've done them, or as you see, okay, that's actually not needed here. So this part, the following instructions will serve as the assignment rubric. Technically, they're part of the instructions. It's just saying these are the instructions, so I'm going to delete that there. Now, just to help focus the eye, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to cross off that information here. And in fact, that 4 to 6 pages, okay, I'll keep that around, but the reminder to follow APA guidelines, I don't feel like I need to focus on that. And crossing it off helps me keep my focus here visually. All right, so continuing through here, we have, all right, a real leadership situation that includes a diversity, need, or conflict. All right, so real leadership, so something in the real world, something that you are probably familiar with from your professional sense. And here's something where I think it's helpful to bullet this, to take this information and break it down into particular steps. And you can use different ways of formatting this. I'm going to use italics here. And so this will differentiate between what was in the instructions and my responding to each part of the prompt. So in this case, I'll say the leadership situation under study is the high attrition rate for non-white teachers at Now, if you just wrote that, that's a high attrition rate. That tells us something, but it doesn't tell us how that is compared to other things, because the attrition rate could be even higher for the white teachers, but we don't know. So if you are a little bit more specific here and write in, oh, is the higher rate compared to that, now we have, okay, the leadership situation under study is the higher attrition rate for non-white teachers compared to their white peers at the local school district. And okay, so this, we have the general situation, and there's going to be additional information about that. You know, is this going to be something that's been going on for a long while? Well, you know your situation, so And whatever information you have here, we're not expecting at this stage that you will be citing published sources, because remember, you're being asked to de-identify or disguise. So this is something that there are a couple ways you can do it. You could just say at the local school district, or you could write at an urban school district in Central Texas, for example. Or you could even refer to this as using a pseudonym. Let's say and so now we have a name that we can use for more naturalistic phrasing and an acronym CSD. And so this can become CSD's attrition rate has increased. And then rather than say the local, by its superintendent. Now, when you are disguising the information, you usually don't want to do something like saying, oh, in 2019, this district enrolled 11,934 students and the exact number of faculty members, because then you could just hop onto Google and find those published numbers, and then it's no longer disguised. So there will usually be some rounding off to help ensure this de-identification. So when you're describing this, you might have something like this. And then, okay, well, and now often as you are writing, you will say, okay, I remember reading that. I read it in this course, perhaps even this course this week, but you don't remember the exact author and date. If that happens, just give yourself a placeholder here. Just make sure that you actually go and check to make sure that you have filled in a source and that the source does say the things that you are noting there. But when you're outlining, when you're just doing your early drafting of ideas, it's fine to give a placeholder because that helps you focus your attention on the ideas as they're coming out rather than stopping and interrupting to go look through all your notes. Now, when you are looking at this, it's helpful to not just ground this in the literature, but if you can, and this may not be something that you can do yet for this assignment, but perhaps when this gets expanded into something for a dissertation, to relate this to real data. So if you're saying, okay, it's generally associated with poor educational outcomes, now, I don't know what particulars you will know about your district. We have students in the program who have all sorts of different positions, some of which do involve their collecting data on that, and some of which it's more, oh, that's at the district act, not here at the school. Give what you have that will support this, and remember the focus of this assignment is on the literature review part. This is just giving us the part of the basis for that. Now, once you've gone through and seen, okay, I've done this, you have a couple choices. One of them is to cross it off, or I've seen many students like bolding it as their visual mark of, okay, I've done everything there. All right, so now come to research question that will help you understand the problem, move you toward an evidence-based solution. And there are a lot of different directions that you could go on this. But it does say, be sure that your research question falls within the areas of leadership and diversity. So we're going to start off with the research question guiding this lit review. And let's say is what leadership strategies will improve teacher retention? Now, you want to be careful about not getting too specific at this stage. Because if you started out with what leadership strategies will improve teacher retention in this school district in a 6-month period, well, first of all, the attrition is usually looked at on an annual basis. And also, I don't know that you'll find many things that are looking specifically at this worked in 6 months. So I would avoid the temptation to specify a period of time already. But if you're looking at this in this school district, are you really trying to find out right now what will work in the school district specifically, or in, let's say, urban school districts in Central Texas? Now, Central Texas is pretty big. If you're saying Central Delaware, like, that's kind of specific. Are we talking about Newark, or are we talking about Wilmington? Those are pretty much your only choices there. But, lots of people in Texas, lots of data available on these. So, think about your question and be aware that this will probably evolve for your eventual dissertation. But right now we're just looking at what might be done and to help answer this question, what might address this problem, and knowing that you'd have to ultimately design a study that will collect data to try and demonstrate this. Now, here's an interesting thing here. The instructions specifically say, move you toward an evidence-based solution. And that's a good thing to keep in mind, because there are plenty of leadership philosophies that you can read about that don't have data to back them up. But if you're going for an evidence-based solution, you could modify your question along the lines of, okay, what evidence-based leadership strategies? Now, you're looking for things backed up by data and by analysis of that data. All right, usually people don't have too much trouble with the rationale statement. And something to keep in mind is that for this part of it, you might go back to this section and say, okay, I actually have more detail than I need here. Let me move some of that down here and introduce that as, okay, it is important to answer this question because, and then give some of those answers here. So there may be some reorganizing as you look at the relative length that you need. If you end up writing 2 pages for number 1, very likely some of that information would make more sense being used to answer number 3. All right, library database, we talked about that. This part, you're going to have your literature search results section and going here. And in keeping with the next one, in saying to include relevant concepts with subheadings. So here's how you would do that. All right, so we're going to have our APA Level 1 heading here, and very likely, unless you're working at some local library, you'll end up having something like this. And that should be a very easy thing to write up if you have taken notes, or if you've remembered to turn in the sign in button and to record what you have been doing earlier. All right, so this one of the reasons to bold as you go is that you're going to need a bunch of subheadings later, so this is going to be coming back. And eventually you'll be synthesizing this. Let's just go ahead and put in here. This is going to be the literature review body. And again, we're going to go ahead and give that an APA Level 1 heading. And let's just say I went through and let's give some headings here. Now, I don't know what the headings will be for your particular study, but as you start looking at the articles that you have, you will think of ways to fit these together and to avoid trying to summarize the whole thing, but just fit with, okay, here's the particular things that we need in this section. And so let's say we're working on this section here. Now, these instructions say, okay, you want to synthesize these to conceptual statements. What's that going to look like? That could be something like, and this is the kind of framing statements that introduce the things that you're discussing. For example, Juarez 2020 found that, and whatever that ends up being. And here we have the synthesizing statement that would tell us, okay, so what does this mean put together, or what happens when you apply this to our particular context? All right, so go through this in order and with your 8 sources, and you will very soon end up having the 4 to 6 pages that you're required to have here. Don't spend so long and so much time on the introductory parts. These are important, but if you have pages and pages on each individual one, you're not going to have much space left over for the lit review itself, which should be a fair-sized portion of this. All right. With this, this concludes our webinar for today. Let's just wrap things up with a brief recap. So we looked at the core principles of literature review writing, about how understanding what you need to do helps guide how you organize the information and what you leave out, enabling you to write a concise lit review. We also talked about the process of searching for journal articles, for how to discover relevant sources and to copy the citation information into your course paper template to save on time. Do remember to proofread. And then we looked at the specific assignment and how to take those guiding instructions to differentiate between what's preamble and here's the specific list of what you're being asked to do, and how to take those instructions and use them to start drafting and outlining your paper. Feel free to watch any of our many related webinars on the Writing Center website or on our YouTube channel. If you have questions, you can send us an email at onlinewritingcenter@acu.edu. You can go ahead and schedule an appointment to visit us, or view all the resources that we have collected at the Online Writing Center website. Have a good day, everyone.